So this will be my comprehensive Dagger Pistol Daredevil build guide. So let's go over the build and then I'll talk about some topics and why I've made those choices. So I take Berserker Divinity with Absorption, Exploitation on the Dagger Pistol and Cleansing Energy on the Shortbow. In Daredevil I take Marauder's Resilience. So in combination with Rune of Divinity and Marauder's Resilience, I have 15,000 health with the Berserker Amulet. So normally you'd have 11,000 and that's way too squishy and allows you to kind of get one-shotted by a lot of things. So you really want the aggressive potential of having the Berserker Amulet because it gives you 400 more ferocity and like 200 more power than a Marauder Amulet, right? But you get the vitality back from these two traits with the rune and the trait. So the thing is, you have to think about the trade-off of Rune of Divinity and this trait. So normally you would be taking Escapist Fortitude because that gives you Condi Cleanse, and the reason why that's not that big of a deal is because the playstyle of this build is not really to dodge in combat and to avoid things with your evades. It's more of to use your dodge to get better positioning and dodge or avoid things with your positioning rather than with actual evades. So you're not really getting that much value off of this trait from Condi Cleanse. And it's also very easy to play around it, right? You could just Condi burst them and then not attack, and then they can't really do anything about it. So taking this trait doesn't really sacrifice that much, and I've substituted in Signet of Agility instead of Signet of the Assassin. So that's another topic that is pretty important. So Signet of the Assassin gives you a lot of burst damage, but it has been nerfed because there was a bug that made it do a lot more damage than it should have been, and it just makes you kind of predictable to use. It gives you like a 4-second window to do extra damage, or 5-second, and when someone sees that, they just know to use all their cooldowns during that moment. And yeah, it's a 30-second cooldown, so it's just too predictable. Whereas Signet of Agility allows you to forego a little bit of Condi Cleanse, right? And it allows you to play more aggressively because of that, right? So let's look at the rest of the build, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So you take Havoc Specialist, and that's just better than Pulm because it makes all of your damage increase, and Pulm is very situational increase. So this is just higher DPS. Dash, this is really good because it just allows you to do the role of thief and move around the map and be at places before other people and to be just slippery. It also removes all movement inhibiting conditions, which is super important. So in Shadow Arts, we take Shadow's Embrace. This removes damaging conditions when you go into stealth. So combined with Dash, these two traits remove quite a bit of conditions, but what they don't remove are, say for example, blind or weakness or vulnerability. And weakness is super important to remove because that prevents this build from doing a lot of its damage, because that's the hard counter, right? You want to be able to do your damage in the windows that you want to do them because this is a burst build. So if you get weakness on you, then you've missed that opportunity. So it's really important to be able to remove weakness when you want, and you can't really do that with Escapist Fortitude anyways. So Signet of Agility is super important for allowing you to be aggressive, and because of all those decisions that I've made, I can also take Berserker Amulet, which just gives you more damage as well. So I really like this setup, and also just in general, you're allowed to play more aggressive because you have, instead of like a Marauder Eagle where that would do more damage when they're below 50% HP, you have this damage all the time, right? So you don't have to, it allows you to kind of just be aggressive and not like overthink things. You just make plays and react. So Shadow Arts is another topic I might want to discuss. So a lot of people compare Shadow Arts to Deadly Arts because those are the interchangeable traits here. You know, Trickery, you just take the normal Trickery stuff because that's just, you know, the bread and butter of Thief. But Shadow Arts, you kind of want to compare to Deadly Arts. So Deadly Arts has Mug, which has been nerfed to do very little damage and has decent healing. You have Lotus Poison, which is nice, but you don't need that anymore because of Weakening Strikes. And the poison on Serpent's Touch, combined with Mug, is sort of comparable to Leeching Venoms because that gives you 600 damage on 2 Venom procs. So that's kind of replaced there, and this is kind of replaced by this. You don't really need any of these 3 traits if you take Shadow Arts and Daredevil. And then even the odds, which you'd normally take, is kind of like Shadow Siphoning. So right here, you know, Shadow Arts is, you know, doing enough with just these 2 traits for these, and obviously Daredevil. And then Exposed Weakness, yeah, that's pretty good. It gives you damage on targets that are, you know, conditioned, but it's not, you know, game breaking. And then Improv, that is an insane trait, but that's kind of the only reason you're taking Deadly Arts, right? So while that is really good, I think that Shadow Arts gives you a lot more survivability and sustain to allow you to play aggressively, to make the plays that Deadly Arts aims to make. So yeah, the Shadow's Embrace allows you to cleanse Condis over time, and it allows you to basically not use Signet of Agility defensively. It allows you to use it aggressively. So yeah, that's kind of like the whole point of this build is to be aggressive, right? You need to follow through and get kills. So I just feel like, you know, you have to use Signet of Agility to gain momentum for your team a lot of times, and if you're constantly using that to cleanse Condis for you, you can never use it aggressively. So it's nice to have this. So I just feel like you're comparing Shadow's Embrace and Cloaked in Shadow to Improv, right? And that's just, this is so good, as I just mentioned, because you can use Signet of Agility more aggressively, and Cloaked in Shadow also allows a different play style that is kind of different. So I'll go over that a little bit. So the reason why Cloaked in Shadow is better than Rending Shade is, first of all, Rending Shade is nerfed. You have 1 boon steal on sneak attack when you used to have 2, and then the fear duration is situational and even not that good when the situation occurs. Cloaked in Shadow is kind of nice because it gives you Life Siphon when you blind and blind when you enter stealth. So basically the reason why this is better is because the playstyle of Thief has to change because Backstab is not as valuable anymore. They basically nerf Backstab to where you can't like one-shot people anymore with it. So you don't gain that much from going in stealth for a really long time and then looking for the right moment to backstab. You kind of just want to backstab whenever you can, and then you need to follow through with actual abilities. So what you end up doing is you often need to stick to targets, and you get a lot of counter pressure from them if you're not in stealth, right? They see you. So you need to blind them very often, and blinding them just gives you so much value because it gives you sustain and damage, which you need to stay in those fights long enough to get the kill. Now, obviously in Trickery, you're going to be taking Thrill of the Crime for the Fury and Bountiful Theft for the Boon Rip. This has been nerfed to 2 boons, so I substitute in the Absorption Sigil to get a little bit more Boon Rip, and it also, you know, gives you that boon. So if you, like, say there's a Necromancer and they pop Spectral Armor and you interrupt them, you steal like 8 seconds of protection. So it's just kind of nice. And removing Swiftness from Necros is also good too, because they have speed runes and it makes them really slow and easy to chase. The priority system on Sigil of Absorption is actually not that great, but it does prioritize resistance pretty high. So if you're against like a Condi Rev, that's really nice. Otherwise, the priority is not that good, and it's just really good to combine with Bountiful Theft, because you're stealing a ton of boons at the same time. Obviously, Sleight of Hand is really good. In World versus World, because you don't have to take an amulet like in PvP, which gives you all of your stats, you're allowed to mix and match your gear. So I take a mix of Berserker armor and weapons and Marauder's trinkets, and that basically allows me to get my vitality without taking the Divinity rune. So I can take Rune of the Scholar and have a decent amount of health. So that's pretty nice. And on my sigils, I take Superior Sigil of Air. That's just really good because it adds to your burst and it's quite a low cooldown. And on my pistol, I'm taking Absorption. So whenever I interrupt a foe, I steal 3 boons. That's just really insane, because the issue with it in PvP is the priority is kinda bad, but stealing 3 boons means it doesn't really matter what the priority is, because if you steal to someone and then you take 2 boons because of Bountiful Theft and then you interrupt them, you would take 5 boons. So essentially you just nuke their whole boon bar, and that's just really insane momentum there. Celerity is also a really good sigil. It gives you quickness when you disable someone, but not always do you really want to be having quickness when you steal to someone or disable them. So I feel that sometimes it doesn't really give you as much value as you think it does. But Absorption is always very good because boons are they're just everywhere in this game, right? Boons are the sustain of the game. So yeah, that's the stats that I take in World vs. World. Obviously, energy cleansing on your bow. Now the difference is, in World vs. World, I would take Dagger Storm instead of Vassy Venom, just because it's just better for scaling up in larger scale fights, right? So I take Dagger Storm, and that's pretty much it. World vs. World is very similar. So yeah, let's talk about the utilities. I take Channeled Vigor because this fits the playstyle of Dagger Pistol better. The only other choice is Withdraw, but Withdraw forces you to use your heal and your dodge that you get from that at the same time. And a lot of times you don't want to dodge and heal at the same time because you'll be in stealth and you don't necessarily need to dodge something. So also, sometimes dodging will sacrifice your positioning. So being able to choose when you want your dodge and when you want your heal is really nice with Channeled Vigor. So I just prefer that. And it also is kind of nice with the Shadow Arts trait because it gives you longer stealth. So like often the playstyle is you go in stealth, you like burst someone, then you'll go back in stealth, and then you'll use your heal skill, and that'll give you more stealth. So it just synergizes with the Dagger Pistol playstyle just better. Obviously, Shadow Step is a huge playmaking skill that you want on your bar in like every thief build. The general idea of when you want to use Shadow Step is to get a kill, because obviously your role is to get a kill, but if you're forced to use it to survive, then it's that's kind of nice too. But yeah, if you think you can get a kill with it, basically use it then. Don't save it just to survive every time. Use it aggressively in a lot of situations. So like if you need to get a stomp, you obviously Shadow Step stomp it, or you don't have any initiative and you can't Shadow Shot to catch up, so you use Shadow Step to catch up. And yeah, just use it aggressively and to make plays, because this next skill, Blinding Powder, you can use as kind of like your stun break. So yeah, you have 2 stun breaks here, so you don't need to always be like, oh, if I get stunned here, I'll die because I don't have a stun break. So you have Blinding Powder as your stun break, and you have Shadow Step as your playmaking ability. And also just in general, Blinding Powder is really good for playing aggressively because you can go in, and if something happens and you get CC'd for some reason, you can just Blinding Powder and then go in for the backstab, and they're blinded twice because of Cloaked in Shadow, because you blind with it, and then you go in stealth, which blinds again, and you're just allowed so much avoidance of counter pressure because you're blinding people in return for, you know, getting damage. So I really like that. Obviously, Signet Vigility is super good for following through. Like if you have weakness on you and you want to keep getting the kill, you follow through with, you know, getting, or like say you're blinded and you're in stealth and you don't want to clear the blind with backstab because say like your stealth is running out and then you won't be able to backstab, so you clear the blind with Signet Vigility and then you backstab. You can also clear the blind with like a Heart Seeker as well, so that would be nice, but that would cost initiative. So yeah, it just depends on the situation. But yeah, those are pretty much the utilities. You use Bassy Venom as well because it's super good for +1s. The playstyle of Dagger Pistol is to get kills and focus targets. So allowing your teammates to stun the target, and then you can even stagger the stuns. So say you give Bassy to your team and they hit the target, then you wait a little bit before using your Bassy, and then you hit them, and then you can get like a 3-second stun on them, and that just allows you to focus targets so easily. Dagger Storm is not that good anymore because it's just been nerfed a little bit. It fits more of the playstyle of Sword Dagger Thief. So as I said before, the playstyle has moved away from the big backstab openers and more to sticking to the target and pressuring them as hard as you can. So how it generally works is you'll use your 5-2-2 combo as always, and you'll go in for the backstab, but you don't really steal into the backstab, right? Because that's investing too much into the opener. But the rotation is something like backstab and then you restart the rotation. Black Powder has been buffed to have a wide radius, so it helps you to prevent them from counter pressuring you. So the blinds are really nice, and you want to just kind of like kite inside the Black Powder and use your auto attack chain. The final auto attack chain is the most valuable, so landing that is really important. So you do the auto attack chain twice in your Black Powder, and by the time the auto attack chain of the second one ends, your Black Powder is ending, and then you want a Heart Seeker. Your Heart Seeker will do a little bit of damage, and it'll also blind with Cloaked in Shadow. So this is really nice because your Heart Seeker animation can be kind of clunky, so giving a blind at the end prevents them from counterplaying it and like precasting something into your Heart Seeker. So that's really nice, and then you just reset the combo from there. So you open with the backstab, and then you 5 auto attack chain, and then you 2 into backstab and then restart. So yeah, that's pretty much the general, you know, basic combo. Obviously there's going to be situations where you have to change it up. So like if you put the Black Powder down and then they dodge out of your Black Powder, well then you'll want to Heart Seeker towards where they dodge, you get the blind, and then you can backstab. Obviously, yeah, chasing with Shadow Shot and chasing with Heart Seeker if they're really low is really good because you get extra damage on this. You can also do things like Black Powder, and then if they do want to counter pressure you while you're in this and they have really high tempo or like quickness or something, you can use Headshot, and what this will do is it'll delay them by interrupting their cast, and it'll also give them another blind because Headshot is a projectile finisher, and this gives you a lot of prevention of, you know, getting counter pressured. So it also gives you a lot of sustain from Cloaked in Shadow. So yeah, this is really good, and yeah, just mainly you're getting a lot of damage and sustain from Cloaked in Shadow while sticking to targets and blinding them. And in team fights it's really good to use Black Powder as well because it's so wide that it can often hit many targets. So yeah, you'll get a lot of healing from that. And yeah, that's pretty much the basic combo. You'll want to use Steel whenever it's an opportune time to use Steel. So normally as a Deadly Arts Thief you just use Steel at the opener because that gives you extra damage, but with Shadow Arts you don't actually get anything besides Boon Rip. So you do want to save it for removing protection or interrupting a key ability. So like a heal skill, so like say I open on this guy and they get scared and then they use their heal skill, I'll save my steal to interrupt that. Or if I land, half of my auto chain and then I've got the final one and I want to land that final attack, and they, dodged away, I can close the gap and hit the Lotus Strike for some decent damage, which would give them, poison. Or say, for example, like I put down my black powder and they move out of it immediately, and I want to Heartseeker steal into them so that I can get in range for my backstab. It would also blind them with the end of my Heartseeker, and yeah, it would just be really good. So yeah, because Swipe has kind of been made into a 600 range ability, you need to be staying in the fights and not like going out and going for like these, long range steal bursts anymore. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You just do black powder, you auto attack, and you just blind people to prevent them from counter pressuring you, and yeah, just use steal to create momentum. I'll leave a video down below and kind of give you more information on how to steal and stuff like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Obviously there's also Shortbow that you want to use. I'll leave a video down below as well to show you how the Shortbow kind of works. And yeah, that's pretty much the playstyle. So the role of Thief is to get kills for their team around the map. And a lot of people like to oversimplify this with a term called +1, which essentially means you'll be going into a 1v1 and disrupting that and killing one of the players of the 1v1. However, there are a lot more factors than that, and you'll often be needing to kill the target as quickly as possible to get value out of this outnumbered situation, right? Because your team is outnumbered elsewhere while you are outnumbering here. So getting that kill as quickly as possible is nice, but as a thief, you're really squishy and it can be really risky to just go in as aggressively as possible. You have to sometimes play a little bit safe even though you're outnumbering someone. So it's important to understand matchups. Even if you're not 1v1ing, you still need to understand how to play against certain classes. So I'm going to go over all the classes and what you need to do to kill them as efficiently as possible while taking as little damage as possible, because you never know what's going to happen. The fight might be evened up and you could die, and then that becomes an outnumbered situation for your team. So let's start off with Necromancers. Necromancers have very long cooldown heals with long cast times that are high value, so interrupting these heals is the best way to pressure them. Interrupting a skill puts it on a 4-second cooldown, so they'll often be forced to go into Shroud if that happens, because they'll be way too open to being attacked in that 4 seconds. So if it's a Reaper, they'll be dealing tons of damage while in melee range, so you want to save steal for when they use their stability in Shroud to prevent them from wreaking havoc on your team. This will also delay them for their natural Shroud degeneration to work its way, which is faster than the Core Shroud, right? Core Shroud is 3% per second, and Reaper is 5% per second. So you want to delay them as much in Shroud as you can. A Core Necro or Scourge will be much tankier in Shroud, so generally saving cooldowns and initiative and just kiting until they leave Shroud is the best way to deal with that. When you steal to a Necromancer, you'll also get a Fear, which is an AoE, and it's really nice to use this Fear on them when they're in their Shroud, because it helps you to delay and they lose health whenever they're feared, so it's like you're doing damage to them. So this is really good. And the Stolen Fear also fears for longer the closer you are to the target. So yeah, you want to be in melee range when you fear them with that, so you can get more of a delay. And yeah, once they leave Shroud, they have a 10-second cooldown to re-enter it. So that is your kill window of the Necromancer, is that 10 seconds between their two Shrouds. So you really need to save your cooldowns while they're in Shroud so that you can throw them all into their after Shroud. Next is Revenants. So Revenants have a legend swap mechanic that gives them energy up to 50 when they swap. So they have massive power spikes when they swap legends. And they'll generally spam their most expensive abilities right after that. So this is the best time to interrupt them with headshots or steal, because they also gain tons of boons from their legend swap. So if you interrupt the Malix abilities of the Condi Revenant, you're going to set them back very far, because those are usually very expensive. And Malix Revenants often have very few evade frames, so they'll be easy to land your steal on. And they also rely on resistance to survive, which you can steal very easily with the Absorption sigil. And you'll basically prevent them from gaining more resistance if you interrupt them, because they gain resistance when they use Malix skills. When swapping to Glint legend stance, Revenants have much more energy because facets cost basically nothing to consume, only to maintain. So they can just spam that out and basically lose nothing. They also have their Glint heal, which converts damage. So generally focusing a Rev while they're in Glint stance is very hard to do, because they have so much energy and resources and sustain. So yeah, generally that's when you want to kite a Revenant. And while in Shiro stance, a Power Revenant is very easy to focus. While they do have evades from riposting shadows, it will cost them a lot to do so. So what you often want to do is to pressure them into using the riposting shadows, because they don't gain anything other than just stalling for time from that. And it prevents them from using more aggressive skills like phase traversal, which can often do quite a bit of damage to you. So yeah, pressuring them while in Shiro is the best option. Another good time to steal is when they use their staff or shield blocks, because you have an unblockable daze on steal. Warriors have tons of evades. Whenever they gain might, they gain endurance. And you can't really stop them from gaining might other than just not being hit by them. So often trading with a warrior is bad, because you're giving them more sustain than you're doing damage to them. So you want to, instead of going for high burst trades, you want to go for sticking to them without taking too much damage in return. So the way that you'll do this is by spamming blind on them. So Shadow Shot and Black Powder are the best ways to pressure a warrior without allowing them to turn around and almost one-shot you. Saving Steal for the shield block is really good, but other good times to steal include during their Greatsword 5 rush animation, which would prevent them from getting a lot of distance from you, or after they used their Greatsword Whirl, because they usually are at the end of their dodge rotation when they do that. Warriors who are greedy for holding the node can also be punished very hard with the Warrior Stolen ability, which you can combine with Black Powder for insane blinds and damage. Rangers are very hard to trade with while they're in the Greatsword. So what you want to do against them is you want to pre-cast a Black Powder to manage their abilities. So a lot of their Greatsword skills are actually single hits, so you can often out-tempo them with your blinds when they're in Greatsword. And you'll also be peeling their pet off of you with your Black Powder while you do that, so it's very effective. But you have to be careful, because Rangers have a trait that cleanses conditions whenever they use a wilderness survival skill, and a lot of their skills can actually be instant casts. So whenever they pet swap can do it, and with Quickening Zephyr they can do it. So if they have a blind on them and you expect to blind their maul, they could instantly remove the blind. So you can't really rely on blinds too much, to be honest. But if you know that their pet swap is on cooldown, or if you see they have quickness already on them, then you know that those are on cooldown and you can rely on your blinds more reliably. Rangers also heal for a lot with their heal skills. So if you can interrupt them, it is very valuable, because say for example you get Troll Unguent. That heals for around 9,000 health, and it gives them 4 Condi Cleanse. So it's a huge sustain burst for them. Well, not a burst, but over time, right? And if you interrupt it, you set them back in the rotation very far. So yeah, it's really good. You either want to steal into their Greatsword block, which gives them a lot of sustain, or into their heal, but it's kind of difficult to time it into their heals because they are so quick. Rather than dodging their longbow rapid fire abilities, you want to headshot that, because the rapid fire actually lasts longer than one dodge, so you'd be like dodging twice into it, and it just sets you too far back. And also just in general, you want to use headshot when they're in longbow to prevent them from knocking you back, or you can blind it as well. And blinding their hunter's shot, which gives them stealth, is really good, because when they get stealth it allows them to reposition, and that whole time their pet's hitting you. So yeah, just spamming blind and interrupts while they're in longbow is really good, and just using your steel when they're in greatsword is really good. Engineers can get protection from various sources. Being CC'd will give them protection injection, and hard light arena for hollows, and the elixir passive when they get to low HP. So before you steal to an engineer, you usually want to bait out some of these protection sources. So for example, you could headshot and then that would proc protection injection, or pressure them until they get very low and then steal, or just, use your steal early, and then later on when you do get them low enough, you can steal after that. They do tons of damage in melee, so you got to be careful of their counter pressure. Oftentimes Shortbow is really good for maintaining distance while also dealing damage, but they can also be very mobile sometimes, so that can be hard as well. But yeah, you do want to get them sort of low before trying to finish them off, because if you steal too early, then they'll just resustain. They have a lot of resources to do that, like for example Elixir S, which will make them invulnerable and allow them to reposition while invulnerable. They'll usually dodge at the end of the Elixir S duration, so what you can do to counter this is put down a black powder at the end of their dodge, or at the end of their Elixir S, and then they'll dodge. Then you want a Heartseeker through that into the animation of the dodge, and then they might double dodge, because while in Elixir S they're gaining endurance that whole time, so they might have 2 dodges as well as having an energy sigil. So yeah, you don't want to steal right after Elixir S. You want to wait until they dodge once and then maybe a double dodge, and then you can steal to finish them off. Elementalists have 4 attunements, so fire, air, earth, water. Generally fire and air do damage, and earth and water are defense. Generally attacking them when they're in earth is bad, because they have so much utility and defense while in earth, and water attunement gives them a lot of healing, so you don't want to front load a lot of your damage before they've swapped into water. When they're in fire, they usually just get a ton of damage and not much else, so it's a good time to counter pressure them with steel, because they can't really trade with you if they're dazed. And when they're in air, they have a lot of utility and damage, so you just want to kite them generally when this is the case. So yeah, after they leave water attunement is a good time to burst them, and it's also really good to land your stolen ability, which will give them a very long chill duration, which disrupts Ellie's much more than any other condition, because their attunements are affected by cooldown recharge, and chill gives them longer cooldowns. Guardians have Retal, which makes trading with them very risky. You want to be very quick with your trades, because meditations and mantras allow them to instantaneously counter pressure you. Firebrands can't counter pressure much while in their heal and protection tomes, so stay on them, but don't waste too many cooldowns. The protection tome is a bad time to steal, because they can just regain protection while in it. just auto attack them safely. During their heal tome though, they are very susceptible to interrupts. So the stolen ability of the Guardian is a 3-second daze, which you have to be in melee range, but it's very quick and very short range. So oftentimes what I do is I will steal and then immediately use the stolen ability, and that will often get you a lot of pressure on them because Firebrands have to cast things to get their sustain, and preventing them from do that sets them back very far. So you want to steal into their heal tome usually, and then if you want to save the stolen ability, you can, but oftentimes it's really hard to land because there's so many blinds and blocks. So right after your steal is the easiest time to land it. And yeah, if you're going against a dragon hunter, the thing that you want to look out for most is their F1 tether spear. So while you do want to dodge that, it doesn't always happen that you dodge it. So sometimes you will get speared. If you do get speared, you want to play more aggressively because you're not going to be able to escape them unless you have Shadow Step up, in which case you'd be using it to disengage. But if you're staying in the fight, then you want to play aggressively and interrupt them in melee range. Not only can you not run from them because of the reveal, but also the further you are away from them, the longer you'll be CC'd when they pull you because of the distance you travel. So you want to be as close as possible, so if they pull you, you spend less time CC'd, but also it's harder for them to pull you through their Test of Faith, which is their big damage combos, if you're on the same side of the trap as them. So if they're in longbow, they can do a skill that knocks you back. So you want to just run around them and just interrupt them with dazes and blinds, and just circle them so that they can't land their deflecting shot very easily. And then if they pull you, then they won't pull you through a trap. So that's the best way to handle that. Mesmers have one trick that you need to do to beat them, and that is to land steal. Mesmers give you a glob of ectoplasm when you steal to them, and this gives you tons of boons, including resistance and quickness. So no matter how low value your steal is, the glob is worth it. So just land steal. I know, easy enough said, right? But it's not that easy to do. Mesmer players will know when thieves like to land their steals, such as right after an evade, or right after they reset, or when they're pressured. For this reason, it's best to use unoptimal steals against Mesmers. So stealing into my own dodge animation, which would be impossible for me to combo it with anything, or using my heal skill and then stealing at the same time, which would also not be a time when you'd predict that they would, try to steal into you. So once you do gain the glob, you can be very aggressive because of the resistance and quickness, but be sure not to just spam the glob. You want to use it at an opportune time. So you want to use it to fill the gap between your initiative or your cooldown recharges and just kind of auto attack them. So you'll get a lot of your initiative against them back just because you have so much presence with the glob. Shadow shots are not very useful versus Mesmers because they often get line of sighted by the clones. So Heartseeker is generally the preferable gap closer when you have the glob activated. The Thief matchup is very simple. If they have stealth, then you wait to use your stealth after they use theirs, and then you get the jump on them, because the opener is really not that important. So really it's more about trading and winning resources battles, and if they try to get more stealth than you, they'll have to use more resources. And if you use your stealth after they use theirs, then they have to use way more, right? So another thing is dodging steal is kind of important. It's as important as landing steal, but what is more important than landing or dodging a steal is pressuring the opponent into either using too many resources to dodge steal or using too many resources to land steal. In other words, making them use suboptimal steals. So for example, if you know their steal is up, you can spam blinds with black powder into headshot or shadow shots. Also, you can go into stealth, which would delay the amount of time they have to use their steal, and the longer it's been since their last steal, the more likely they will steal. In other words, coming right out of stealth is a good time to use some dodges. Now, knowing when their steal up is a little bit more difficult, so one trick that I like to use to kind of remember when they use their steal is using the ordering of yours and their steal. So if they stole before you, then their steal is also up before yours. You can make generalizations if the two steals didn't happen close to each other, but for the most part, just remembering that thing makes it very simple, and you don't have to actually count in your head what their steal timer is. Also remember, if you're pressured and think you won't win, you can always just leave. Venom to my team and stealth them into the first team fight. At the moment, the enemy team is crossing towards our home node, so I want to stall them so that our home node 1v1er doesn't get zerged down, because then we won't really have any hold on the map. They'll have sides, and then we'll be at a disadvantage. So I do want to slow them down long enough to allow my 1v1er to gain some sort of sustain and awareness of the situation that they're in. So I see that their revenant is really low. I land a nice Heartseeker steal into it, and we get that kill. The ranger is the target next, and I give out Bassi to my team, and I get a really nice stun lock on them because of it, and that's going to allow us to get this kill as well. So now that we got these kills, the enemy team is actually rotated into mid, like one of their players. So now we're outnumbered at mid. We got the kill at home though, so now we can push into mid and take this team fight while outnumbering them. So we go on their druid and we get this kill. We have to be a little bit careful though, because there's potential to get a lot of damage on us from this guardian and the necro. We get that kill though, and yeah, we pretty much just press W into this because we've got the kills from home and we're outnumbering in the mid. I have to be careful here because the necro and rev can do a lot of damage to me, so I just stealth through and go for the decap, just basically pulling them off of mid so that my team can get the full cap there. So I'm not going to get the decap at far, but I am able to get the kill on the revenant because I pull them on and off the node so much, making them use a lot of their cooldowns to prevent me from getting the decap, which essentially allows me to burst them because they use too many things to try to prevent the decap, and yeah, they don't have anything left to fight me. So now we go into mid, and there's 3 of them mid, so we kind of over rotated into far. And we lost mid, so we're kind of in a bad situation now. So I stay on their necro, but he's in shroud, so I try to kite off. He's just left shroud, so I steal in, but I'm 1v3, so I just leave. Now at this point we want to go into home, so I port through the waterfall and I go towards home, but we've already got a kill there, so I'm not really needed here so much as I'm just staying here because this is the only place I can go, because they're already at mid and I can't really get a decap at mid. So I noticed that their necro, or our necro, is going to cap home, so I can leave, and I tried to share Basilisk Venom to my thief, but he's already in the mix, so I just give it to myself. I jump on their necro, but I did see that their rev just used glint heal, so I swapped to the rev. and I get a nice Bassy there, and we can get this kill on the Rev because they don't have any cooldowns left. So now we want to get on the Necro, and we're just going to outnumber this because that's how this situation works. We've got kills, we have the advantage, but their Necro uses a no port spot, so it's hard for me to aggress on them. They come towards me, but I realize that my Ranger is still at mid, and he should probably be 1v1ing that, especially since the Necro isn't really investing in the node too much. So I don't want to waste time, but then the Necro gets on the node so I can come back and pressure them, and they just leave Shroud. However, their Dragon Hunter comes back, and now we're in a 2v2. It looks like actually a 2v3. So this is a very dangerous situation. I have to be careful and try to help my Druid from dying, but they instantly die to a Dragon's Maw. So as soon as I see that, I know I should go for the decap because this is an unwinnable fight. We're outnumbered, and yeah, I want to split their team at this point. So I go for the decap, I split their team, and we actually get a kill on their Necro in Rhodes. So I want to capitalize off of this in any way that I can. So I want to get the kills on mid, and their Dragon Hunter seems like a good target. They have stability, but I can't really pressure them with my steel because I see that their Rev is on me. I use my steel into their block, and that gets us the kill, and now we can just press W on their Dragon Hunter because we're outnumbering. So yeah, we're gonna get this kill very quickly. I have Sign of Agility that I can give to my team just so they can cleave this as aggressively as possible without, dying to burns. And so right here, I'm kind of stealthing up and not going for the decap immediately because I know that they probably think that I'm going for the decap. So I wait a little bit and then I go for the decap with a stealth into Shadow Step. So I bypass all of their vision, and I get the decap there even though there's 3 people guarding their home because they just didn't know I was going for it. So if I had gone for it earlier when they thought I was going for it, they might have been in a position to stop it because they're just respawning. It's convenient for them to defend it. But if I wait a little bit, then I'm holding 3 people there to prevent a decap. So, that timing there was very important. And now we're just kind of looking for a kill on this Ranger. I tie my backstab into their barrier, but it's not like I use many resources to get that backstab, so I have plenty of resources left to keep chasing this kill. I go in for the Heartseeker into my Black Powder just for the damage, and if I can get the backstab here, that's good too. But yeah, mostly what you want to do is just blind them and Heartseeker them just to stay on top of them. The backstabs are not as important. So, and then obviously I use Basilisk Venom to break their greatsword block. So yeah, that helps us get that kill. I noticed that my Druid is dead here, and I want to maybe not necessarily get the res. I know that they have the pet res, so it's possible, but I want to pressure the Revenant with this situation. So I noticed that my teammate is actually dead over here as well, so I make a Shadow Step res play, and they have to decide between stopping the res on the Ranger or stopping the res on my Necro, or I think that was a Guardian. And they basically, what they do is they choose to stop both reses and they get neither. So there's an ancient Chinese proverb where if you chase 2 hares, you will catch none. And I basically abused their inability to understand that ancient Chinese proverb. So yeah, they tried to stop both reses and they didn't stop either of them. So yeah, that was a really nice save to get a double res play. However, we are a little bit outnumbered here, so we get killed anyways. We have a 3 cap though, so the game is pretty much over. So that's pretty much how you play Thief in terms of rotating around situations where you're winning or where you're losing. You want to get more kills when you're winning, and if you're losing, you want to split them up and create a situation where you can get the kill. So as I said before, check out the links in the description for more resources on how to play DP Thief. Got some steel and shortbow guides, and also I'll be coming out with more single match commentaries so that you can kind of get an idea of the rotations of DP Thief, because that's really the difficulty of DP Thief is not the mechanics so much as the kind of like the strategy. So I'll be doing that, so subscribe if you want to see more of those. Also like the video if you like it, and leave a comment down below if this is something that you want to see more of, or you have questions of any kind. Also check out the Patreon link below if you want to support me but you don't go onto Twitch very often. So yeah, enjoy.